Welcome to the Exchange Living Podcast. I'm Michael Tinney, your host, and this podcast is all about real stories of transformation, what it means to exchange our life for Christ's. On this podcast, we explore what it looks like to walk in that exchanged life every day. All right, I'm so glad you're willing to come on the show today. This is Ed O. There's three Eds at the church where I attend, and we call him Ed O because O is short for Olszewski. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
All right. Give me some ways that people have mispronounced your names over the years.
Olszewski.
No, that's not it.
I can't say the other one.
Oh, thank you for.
Yeah.
All right, we don't want to put an explicit
this kind
thing.
Of a podcast.
This is not an explicit
yes,
podcast.
Exactly.
So just go Ed O for short.
Yes.
How about
yeah.
that? I know, my last name is Tinney. I get a lot of raised eyebrows. Say that again. Run that by me one more time. And I remember with you had to just say it this way. You had to help me out.
The old chef that skis.
Yeah, that's it. The old chef that skis. I remember that. So I've known you now about a year and a half. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, about right. Yeah.
Man, God's done some amazing things in your life. I look
Yes,
forward to hearing about them today. Thank you for coming and sharing your story today. So you're not originally from this area. You came from somewhere else originally.
Yeah.
Right?
So I was born and raised in Middle Illinois, outside of Chicago, and then my family moved down here in '89.
Okay.
And so I've been here since then.
So the new pope is from in Chicago. Do you think that's going to help the Cubbies? That's the big question.
Unfortunately, it's not, because he's a White Sox fan.
Oh, that's not going to help at all. Okay.
But there is a great Italian restaurant up there called Portillo's. Great beef sandwiches. And so hopefully maybe the Vatican will get a Portillo's now. So now I'll have a reason to go to Rome.
Okay, very good, very good. So you were up there. So how old were you when you moved down to the South?
I was, in '89. So I was 13? Yeah, I think it was around 13. Yeah, 13.
Wow, that's a tough age for
it was
anybody.
my 8th grade year. So yeah, it was around 13.
So you leave all your friends behind. You have to come here where you know nobody?
I didn't know anybody. And yes, it was quite a cultural shock. Being from the North and a lot of the old Southern, so to speak, ways. I was a Yankee, and that's how I was viewed. I was picked on, talked about because of the way that I spoke.
Yeah.
I didn't have that Southern drawl and so forth. So it was hard, but I gradually then I met some good friends.
But you learned some key phrases like "I'm fixing to."
Yeah, I'm fixing to. Yaunt to. Yes.
Yaunt to, yeah.
I remember a friend of mine came to spend the night at our house, and my mom asked him. We were having dinner, and my mom asked him. She goes, "You want a pop?" And he was afraid to answer anything because he thought my mom was going to hit him. And he looked at me, and I said, "No, she means you want something to drink."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, a Coke."
Yeah, that's relatable. You do that one more time, I'm going to pop you. We don't drink pop here. So I can imagine that had to be pretty traumatic to leave a place where you have an established friend network, life is normal, and you're catapulted down to another culture where you know nobody. At 13 years old is not the easiest time in the world to make
No,
friends.
it's not. I mean, that was the tail end, like I said, junior high, and then you're going into high school, which is your big years, and now I'm, so to speak, I'm not established.
So I think Southern people hear you talk and think, oh, man, this guy might be smarter than me. I better give him a hard time.
The school systems were a lot different down here than they are up north. I was, in some aspects, a little bit more advanced, so to speak, because of the classes that they required up there compared to down here.
Yeah, I think at one time Georgia was like 48 out of the 50 states in education, so you're not wrong. I don't know what it is currently. That's an old statistic. But anyway, that's as a guy who's lived my whole life here in the state of Georgia, except for the wayward years of college down in Florida, I've never had to really do what you did, especially at a difficult time of, being a middle school, or back then they called it junior high, right?
You're right, yeah.
Yeah. And then being the kid that's just a little different than everybody, that just had to be tough.
It was tough. I mean, trying to find my place.
Here's what I really want to know. Did you get in any fights during that time over this?
Yes, I did.
Did you win them?
Yeah, I could hold my own. I did wrestling when I was in junior high up north, and I was fairly good at it. And there was times when I had to hold my own in because of the way I was picked on and talked about. I had a lot of anger issues when I was younger.
Yeah.
So it was not uncommon for me to get into fights.
Yeah, I asked the question, but I'm half jesting, being silly, because I can imagine what it was like during that time in this area for you. It had to be really hard, and I'm sure there were times where it did go more than just verbal, and you had to stand up for yourself to prove yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad those days are behind you. We won't be fighting anywhere on this episode today.
No.
I'm glad you found a new friend group.
No, Lord, when the Lord's got your heart,
yeah,
man, it's a whole different piece.
So you grew up kind of as a missionary almost. I mean, you're adjusting to a new culture here, and describe a little bit about your religion. Like, you're a religious person, but
yes. So I mean, I grew up in the church. We went to Catholic church up north.
Yeah.
Then when we came down here, we found a small local Catholic church, and that's where we went. And that's where we went to church. But it's a lot different. I guess I could say it's a lot different then than it is now. I went to church because I was told to.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents were good parents. They raised us, and they told us we had to go to church on Sunday. Yeah. Got pinched if I didn't sing, so forth. I went to Sunday school classes and all and those things, but I just never really knew why. I just knew that I had to. And that when I did something wrong, I prayed at prayed at the kneeler, on Sundays.
Yeah.
Then I kind of quit going for a little while, and then when I was in my early 20s, let's how I can back this up a little bit. In my early 20s, I met a girl, and we were talking about getting married, but she was Southern Baptist. And I was Catholic.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like the North and the South again.
Yeah. There it is.
But we had agreed that we would try to find a common church. I took her to the Catholic church. That just wasn't going to fly. And I had been to some Baptist churches, but they were some deep Southern Baptist churches. And it was a lot of fire and brimstone. Yeah. And I just didn't feel comfortable. I kind of liked the message a little bit, but I felt like I was just being judged by everybody's eyes.
Are you saying the content was good, but delivery was a little harsh?
Yes, it was. Yes, very hard.
Okay.
So we started going to a couple non-denominational churches. Then fast forward, the relationship just, it parted ways. It just wasn't working out. And I think I was a little too young. She wanted to settle down and be, was more mature. I got back into the Catholic church. And then I started working with the youth. The youth was always kind of been some of my passion, because I did a lot of wrong when I was young, and I did want to see those kids go in the same wayward paths. So I worked with the youth group, and I felt the Lord then, because I felt the purpose and I felt the calling. But I still really, truly, honestly didn't know the Lord.
Yeah.
But I did feel His presence. And I did that for a couple of years, and then things just kind of didn't work out. And so then I got married, had 2 kids. We'd occasionally go to church and made sure I made all the big holidays, kind of a thing. Yeah. 2017, I went through a divorce. Immediately grabbed my 2 girls, and we're going to start going to church because Jesus is going to fix everything. Yeah. But I started going back to church, and I think I was looking for something, but just couldn't find it. Then I had a hard time explaining to my kids why they had to go to Sunday school, why they needed to go to church when I myself didn't feel like going. Yeah. So then I broke off. And then, to be honest with you, that's when I went down a very dark path. Yeah. And in darkness, saying that God was no longer my priority. I became my own idol. Okay. And as I was talking about, and I was thinking about it this morning, when Tuesday night's class, and I started reading the Bible again, I thought to myself, wow, like Saul and David, they were anointed by the Lord. They were anointed by the Lord to become kings. Yeah. And then here Saul is given this, and then he just falls back onto his own. Yeah. And that's what I did. And I thought about it, and I was thinking about it this morning, and I was like, that's what I did. There was no longer God, it was me. I was my God. I became my own God, so to speak. All I cared about was success, money, being the best at everything, and never thought anything about him. Then 2022, I think it was, I lost my job. I mean, I was successful. I was, but pride, ego, all those things, they got me. I lost my job, and I was never bitter at God because I didn't know him.
Yeah.
But I was bitter at those people. Oh, how dare they do this to me?
Sure.
This is, I built this. But then I realized after I started going back to church, my wife, she had seen Scott on a podcast, or Scott on Facebook singing at the church. Yeah. And she knew Scott and Christy, and she said, hey, let's go check out this church. And I said, okay. We had been church surfing, but I couldn't still find a place that I felt good. And
so let me just interrupt you for a minute because you brought up several good points. So first of all, Scott that you're talking about was featured in our first episode. His story, he was the first one to sit in that chair, and I'll never forget the first words of the podcast. I said, how you feeling? He said, I feel really big in this chair. I'm like, you are really big in that chair. But he's this big hulk of a man. So Scott and his wife, Christy, who you're talking about, that would eventually be a connection to bring you to the church where I serve now. So you've covered a lot of ground. You talked about moving here when you were 14 and the culture shock of that. And then a little bit later, you go to church because you're made to go to church. Some people say it this way, a drug problem. I was drugged to church all the time, right?
Yeah.
But you were not drugged to the local Baptist church here in the South. You were drugged to the Catholic church. But at some point, something connected with you because then you start serving in the youth group. And you're like, man, I know what I did. I wanted to help them to not make the mistakes that I did, which is basically summarized a lot of our parenting to trying to keep our kids from doing the things that we did. And they don't listen any better than we did sometimes, perhaps. But then you end up in a relationship that ends in a divorce. And so then you end up putting a lot of energy and a lot of effort into your career, and that resulted in being fired. So I'm guessing by now, what are you, after that happened, mid-30s even, somewhere in there?
Oh, no, this was, I was mid-40s.
Okay, I'm sorry to call you out like that.
No, it's fine. No,
I do notice a lot of guys go through deep brokenness about mid-30s, so anyway, for whatever reason.
Oh, I was broken. I was broken from my 20s all the way up until then. I just didn't know I was broken because all I did was I served me. I served myself.
And that was the other thing I wanted to talk about is, like you said, I think the way that you worded it was you said, I made myself an idol.
Yes.
That I did what I wanted to do. I was the boss, did things my way. And honestly, a life that is lived with that motivation always seems to end up in a place of destruction.
Oh.
And it's never the goal. We don't set out, hey, I want to see how deeply I can destroy my life. But sometimes us being in charge leads us to a place of brokenness. And God shows us our need of Him through that brokenness. And so I've seen this in other lives too. As you share your story, it kind of resonates as familiar in my own life and then the life of other people too. So anyway, I just wanted to go back through because you have such a great story to tell, going from being around Chicago in a Catholic church to the South and dating this girl in the Baptist church, the fire and brimstone, and you got a colorful story. I love the way you set it up and shared that. But now you're married to your wife Susie, and y'all are living here, and somehow somebody wants to go to church. You see the video, Scott, from the first podcast, singing. Yeah, he does sing, and somehow that got you to the church.
Yes. Okay. So she saw that. We lived literally right down the road from the church. Yeah. In fact, I passed it numerous times. Yeah. And so she said, hey, I know these folks, let's go check it out. And to be honest with you, I didn't even want to go, just because we had tried so many different places, and I was feeling that, okay, this just isn't it type thing. And honestly, I didn't have an excuse to say no. Yeah. And I figured if I say yes, we go, and then I did my part, and then we can go right back to normal. And that wasn't the way it was going to be. So we went into that church and didn't meet a stranger. Yeah. And you were new there at the time because that was just starting, I think, your second year. Yeah. And all I remember was we walked out of there, And my wife said to me, she's like, "So what do you think?" I said, "I can't wait to come back next Sunday."
And did she raise her eyebrows when you said that?
She kind of did, yes. Yeah. And I think, and she was excited because this was the type of church that she was really wanting to look for.
Yeah.
Small church, old hymns, things of that nature.
Yeah.
When we first moved down here, we started going to St. James. It was a very small Catholic church. Everybody knew everybody. So to me, I felt that hometown feeling again.
Yeah.
Because when I was young, that's when I felt good. And we had an old priest, but he was very nice, and he could talk to anybody, and you just at that time I felt somewhat of a connectedness. So when we started going there to Philippi, then that kind of came back into me, and I felt that.
Yeah.
And then, following weekend, we started experiencing God.
Yeah, so we had been working towards the end of that year to launch the January of the next year with the Experiencing God. We had a big team of people come in to help launch that. What is it like to walk with God, to see God at work in through your life, and to really be on mission with Him and whatever He wants to do. And so you came in right as we were like launching that thing.
Yeah, and you launched it, and Susie said, "Hey, I know but I said, no, let's do it. I want to do this." And boy, did I experience God.
Yes.
That was when I realized, how do you say, I shed the old me and put on the new. Because just being there in that moment with those people and going through that program, that Sunday was when I didn't have to white knuckle the chair, as they say. I broke down because that's when I realized this is where I want to be, and now I know who I want to be. I want to be closer to the Lord, and I want to serve Him, and I want to go back to feeling that goodness in my heart again. Yeah. I used to joke around. My wife Susie would, say, "Oh, I didn't sleep well last night. I was thinking about this, or I was praying about this." And I used to say, "Not me. I slept like a baby. I don't have a conscience." And I didn't. Yeah. And nothing bothered me, and I didn't care. I didn't care who I stepped on. That was just me. That was the idol. And after that day, man, my heart came down like the walls of Jericho.
Yeah.
That's all I can think of.
Wow.
And I've cried more in the last year and a half or so than I probably have most of my life, because of just the tenderness and how much things affect me, and so forth, and how much I care again. Yeah. So that was, God put us there at the right time.
Yeah. So you were saved, is what you're saying?
Yes, I was saved.
So where were you when you were saved? Were you down at the altar that day?
I was actually second row from the back.
Okay.
When I prayed and when I knew, and I knew in my heart when that I wanted to be saved.
Yes.
And then we came and talked to you. Yeah. It was about a couple weeks later. I might have. A
little bit of time had passed.
Yeah, it was a little bit of time had passed.
Yeah.
And I came to talk to you.
I'm that guy. I'm like, I want to go back through every detail. Are you sure? Did you get it right?
Yeah.
Did you say that? All that.
Yeah.
And man, there was just such evidence of a changed countenance, a changed soul, a changed life, that it was very evident. But it was a beautiful story to look back on. The other part you don't know about that is coming into the end of the previous year, before we launched the Experiencing God, I went to some of the widows in our church, and I said, "Would you pray for God to bring us some younger couples?" We have a lot of seniors at our church. I love them and glad to be their pastor. But churches have to also be reaching younger people. And so as a result of their prayers, not mine, you and Susie came, and Nicholas and Danielle and some others came in during that time as a direct result. But I asked them to pray for people that were hungry to know God.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not trying to build an audience there, right? I want to see God build an army. And so to bring the ones that are hungry to know Him, and that was the connection point, was their prayers and your hunger for God. Man, it was just powerful.
Oh, anybody wants to argue about the power of prayer, I'd be happy to sit down and tell them. I mean, me meeting Susie was through prayer. Yeah. And that was Susie's mom praying for me, didn't even know me, for Susie to meet me. And it's written in a book. Yeah. Because she kept her prayer journals, her mother prayed it, and Susie met me, I think it was 2 days later.
Wow.
That's yes.
What a great testimony.
So that's the power of prayer.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly, like I said, I will argue with anybody over prayer does exist.
I'm going to pry just a little bit, not
Sure.
into your marriage. I don't want to mess with that, but I want to pry just a little bit into you, because the skill set you developed when you landed here at 14, and then the skill set that continually was developed after, a divorce that you had to go through, and then also being fired from a job, it just makes you kind of jaded towards the world. And when you were describing yourself as a person that you don't care who you step on, this is just the way it is, I made an idol out of it, it almost sounds like that's a flesh response to the circumstances of life that you've gone through. And you don't think you don't really articulate it this way, but it's like, I've been hurt enough. If anybody's going to be hurt, it's going to be them and not me,
Yeah, I mean, because when you, I'm trying to how to best put it. When all you care about is yourself, you put up a wall.
Yeah.
And that's all I cared about. I mean, I cared about myself. I cared about, like I said, I idolized I became my own God, and is the best way that I can think of and to put it. I wanted to be the best at everything I did. I wanted to succeed at everything I did. And, and I did. I mean, if I was given a project, I succeeded at it. But I didn't care who I stepped on, who I treated, I didn't care. I surrounded myself with people that I knew would work for me. And when I didn't need them anymore, I could kick them to the curb. It was fine.
Yeah.
Because everything was about me. I always say money, in my opinion, money is the worst drug. And, and I wanted to make plenty of money. I wanted to have all the flashy, nice things instead of, I wanted to build my treasures on earth instead of in heaven. And, and so the more I did, the more money I wanted to make, the more things that I wanted to have.
How long have you been saved now?
Almost 2 years.
About a year and a half,
yeah,
2 years, something like
that.
It's crazy the wisdom that you have as you look back and you see the path that you were on, and it's how you as a saved man assess the unsaved part of your life is incredible. Because technically, if you think in terms of human years, 18 months to 24 months is still kind of a toddler stage. And so spiritually, you have the Holy Spirit of God who gives you discernment. He gives you truth. He gives you everything you need to live a Christian life. And it's just, you have an amazing testimony that you have a lot of religious training in your background. But anyway, it's just exciting for me to hear the words coming out of your mouth. And I'm thinking, this guy's been saved less than 2 years, Because
I seen what I was.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it then because I didn't, like I said, as I said, most people, something bad happens to them, the first thing they want to do is they want to blame God. Yeah. I didn't, because again, I didn't know God. I wanted to blame everybody else because, how dare they, they do this to me. They railroaded me, so to speak. And even then now, I have a firm understanding. I mean, I wouldn't have blamed God anyways. And then it didn't take me long to figure out, I'm the problem.
Wow.
And
somebody was praying for you. I mean, this is what you just said. When you had the epiphany that I am the problem, there's a lot of people who think everybody around them in their life, they're the problem. If they would just see things my way, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
They don't realize they're the common denominator in all this conflict.
Well, it would be my wife that was always praying for me.
Yeah.
Her mother prayed for me to find her, then for her to find me. Then when we found, then Susie prayed for a godly man in her house, and that's what I'm working towards to become is a godly man for her in the house. And she prays all the time. We both pray, and so forth. And I can't immerse myself in enough, programs, Bible, studies, things like that. Sometimes I feel like I'm overwhelmed, and then she'll be like, well, maybe we need to, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
I like these books because this is what's helping to open me up and take the hard look at myself and the changes that I need to make and that I want to make.
Yeah, I admire your determination and your transparency. So let me ask a question here. So you've been saved for about a year and a half, 2 years. How long have y'all been married?
Well, you're gonna get me in trouble.
I don't want to get you in trouble. Just approximately. I think
it's 4 years. Yeah,
Okay.
I think 2020 was when we got
The
married.
part that I'm trying to emphasize is not whether or not you know your anniversary and all that, right? All the men in here are sweating. Yeah, all I want to do is point out that you've been married for about 4-ish years or whatever, and for the time leading up to the last year and a half, she was praying for you, obviously, and it worked. Her prayers were heard. So somebody's watching this, and there's a spouse praying for a spouse, and all I can say is just keep praying.
Yeah.
Your story is one of many that I know of that had, the Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 7 that in a relationship where there's a believer and an unbeliever, however they ended up together, that believer in that relationship sanctifies that home, sanctifies those children, and to not, as long as the unbeliever is willing to stay, because you have a sanctifying influence in that home. And so just keep praying for that lost spouse. Keep praying, because this is, your story needs to be told because it illustrates the power of God through a praying spouse.
And my biggest prayer would be for people is that I pray that they'll find it a lot sooner than I did.
Yeah.
Because the biggest guilt that I now am accepting, or that I'm living with, is my kids. That I told them, like I said, they had to go to church like I was told I had to go to church. Didn't exactly understand or know why, And then when I gave up, I said it was okay for you all to give up.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that now is the hardest thing that I have to deal with right now, is because neither one of my girls are, they'll go to church if I ask them to, but they don't have the drive like I do right now. And I pray and I want them to find that drive, to go back to church.
Yeah.
Susie's got a son too that, we're praying for as well. That and I think he will get there. I know that he will, But it's just like, it's one of those things where when you found something good, you want everybody to have that something good, and you want them to have it right now.
Right.
You don't want them to wait like you were foolish enough to wait.
Yeah.
So.
And really, you weren't fully hungry for it until you had what I'll call the implosion, where you're standing back there and your whole world comes crumbling down inside, however you described it.
And it needed to.
Yeah.
God had to remind me that, no, there's only one, and you're not it.
Yeah.
And that's the case. And I'm glad that he did, because he saved me from a lot with that job. I was going down in a it was a very intense job. I'll be honest. I was drinking a lot. I was angry all the time, and just I was becoming corrupt. I was just filthy on the inside. It's kind of like they say, you can wear the nicest clothes, but what's on the inside really defines you. And I wasn't. I was like a dirty ashtray. Just being true. It's, I was. Because I didn't care. All I wanted to do was make money and be successful.
Yeah.
And so I didn't care. And, God had to thump me off that post and remind me, and I'm glad. I am. I'm in a much, better place now. I have a better job that's less stressful. And it gives me more time to do these things now that I want to do.
Okay, that's powerful stuff. So when you talk about being the dirty ashtray inside, did you see that while you were living it out?
Oh,
or
no.
do you only see it now looking back?
I see it now. Oh, you don't see those things then, because you're feeding a different hunger.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. I remember I got promoted to a position, and I had to travel. And that first year I was gone maybe 45, 47 weeks that year.
Out of 52.
Out of 52.
So you got Christmas and Thanksgiving. You got a few holidays in there.
Yeah, I had a few holidays. I was home maybe on the weekends. Sometimes I was gone for 2 weeks at a time. And I had just gotten divorced. And both of my kids, I was like, hey, Daddy got a promotion, and I got to travel. And I had met Susie, and so she kind of took care of Alex to an extent. My sister had to step in, because I thought about it, but then I was like, no, I need this career, and I traveled, and that's another regret that I have, because I should have been there more for them.
I think I want to give you grace, man. All of us as parents look back and wish we had done better, and wish we had done differently than we did. So I think everybody feels that to some extent. I want to kind of shift the conversation now, based on everything you just said, to Tuesday night in the group. Like, I know that the listeners to this episode today weren't in that group. Technically, I wasn't either. I was at the beach with my family, so someone filled in for me. But I hate putting you on the spot, but it doesn't make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're not in the hot seat.
Can you look at the things that you just said about being through, these are harsh words, but a failed marriage, a failed career, coming to that moment of brokenness? Do you see a connection between those events in your life and the things that y'all talked about Tuesday night about finding that worth and all?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's it was funny, because that's what the topic was about. It was so much of not relying on the human approval, but relying on the Lord's approval, because that's the only approval that you truly need.
Yeah.
And that's and I was nowhere near that.
Yeah.
All I wanted was human approval. I wanted the attaboys, the accolades, the awards. I wanted all those things.
And what were you doing to try to secure those for yourself? What kind of behaviors did you have that would cause people to praise you?
I mean, I would be successful. Success.
Yeah.
I was success driven. Yeah, you give me a project, I was going to find a way to get that project done. I was going to find a way to save you money or make money. So and so forth. And again, but I'd work long hours.
Yeah.
I sacrificed everybody but myself.
That was a powerful testimony. So, wow. So your journey led you on a path of trying to please yourself, and that would produce for you people's admiration, people's approval and affirmation.
Oh, yes.
Mine was opposite. Mine was trying to please other people, and if you did it well enough, you could get that affirmation, but it didn't last long, and you had to go do more and more and more. So I always describe that as the treadmill to exhaustion. And there's somebody watching this, listening to this today, and they're on the treadmill to exhaustion. I'm tired of working hard to get approval, then over time I just get so full of people expecting too much of me, and they get angry at the very people they're using to find their worth. And so the whole idea is to realize Christ is our life, and that He is a river of living waters flowing out of us, and the life we're looking for externally, if we're born again, is already within us. And when we understand that and live that out, we approach business relationships, employee relationships, marriage, everything in terms of I have life to share now because Christ is overflowing through me, as opposed to I'm empty and I'm going to use everything around me to fill that empty spot. So these things we're talking about are profound, but they're simple.
Yeah.
And they're also relatable, that somebody's struggling with that very same thing that you and I have struggled with in our past. And I think it's in our past, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't want to go back to the old me by any means. I want to move forward with this, with a better feeling. I want to walk into a room and I want people to look at me and go, that man knows Jesus.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And, and I want to have that, and I want to be able to use that to express to others.
Yeah.
That there is something way better out there than this world.
Yeah.
So to speak,
Yeah, I love that. That's my heart too. This morning I was reading in the scriptures about how these Greek people in, I think, John's gospel came up to Philip, and they said to Philip, "Sir, we want to see Jesus."
Yeah.
And for some reason, they thought Philip was the way to get to Jesus, like they saw something in him. And my heart was struck exactly like what you said. I want people to look at me and think, there's a guy that can tell me about Jesus. I want to be like him. I want to love like him, and to have that presence of God in my life that is him. That a lot of times in my life, when people are attracted to me, it's really not me at all, because I'm not that great of a guy. And, to prove I'm not being fake humble, ask my wife who lives with me, and she'll tell you about that. But as Christ in me, He said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself.
Yeah.
And so when we live in obedience to Him, He's exalted in our life. He has a drawing factor. Just you and I at lunch today, God dropped somebody right at our table. Man, that's crazy.
Yes, He did.
Is it because we're great, or because God is in us? I think it's because God is in us.
That's the one thing I never want to lose, is the humble and the humiliating feelings. Yeah. Because I don't want to, because I fear that if I ever don't feel humble anymore, I will go back to being that old me. You know, I think we all have to have some kind of a humbleness, and that's what keeps us drawn in closer to God. Because when you start losing that humbleness, then you start realizing, you start feeling, I don't need Him. I can do this all on my own. That's how I was. I can do all this on my own. He's not doing anything for me. And then all of a sudden, nope, knock you off the peg.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the good thing. Yeah. So, and that's one of the things I think I even mentioned to my wife about, was like, I don't ever want to lose the humbleness or any humiliation, because that's what keeps you, in my mind, grounded.
Yeah, so humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. You know, we just have to realize who we are. And the process of brokenness that you went through that led to that implosion, second row from the back, sitting in church, was an ordained moment by God. He brought you to that point of brokenness, but He would not force Himself on you. He waited for you to call out to Him. Yeah. And I think that's one of the aspects of God, that people are just waiting on Him to, knock their world over so that they can believe in Him. And really, He just allows us to, all the props that we have holding up our life, He'll knock them out so that we realize we have nothing of ourselves, that we need something more than ourselves, and it is really we need Him. And when we have that moment, what we do next determines whether we believe God or not. The person who comes and all the props are knocked out, I got nowhere else to go but you. I was talking to a friend of mine this last week who's very wise, and he talked about brokenness in the Christian life, and he said, you're not really broken and fully surrendered until you're out of promises. And man, that jolted me. Yeah. And this is not my content, this is his, and I'm hoping that he'll be able to come share this with all of us. But God, I'm sorry I did that, but next time I will. No, you still got a promise, right? So that means you're not fully. And so to live in that complete surrender and brokenness, God, I can't do anything, but through you I can do all things.
Right.
Something about that. And so when you're talking about staying in that humble position, humble is a difficult thing to talk about. The more you talk about it, the more arrogant you sound. And I don't know why it's that way, but it's that way. But I admire your heart. I agree with you 100% that the more humble we can become, the more capacity we have for the Spirit of God to dwell and to work in us and through us. Yeah. So I would be curious to know. Now, remember, your wife is going to watch this, so I'll hold you to that level of.
That's fine. I mean, she has saved my life in more ways than I can.
Well, the question I want to ask you is how would you describe that your life has changed since you were saved a year and a half ago? You've done a good job of describing kind of the guy that you were before, but what's changed in your life since Jesus moved in?
My attitude, my overall feelings, I don't fill my pockets with money. Now I carry a cross in my pocket. Yeah. And usually I carry an extra one in case I meet someone who might need one. Okay. Well, as I showed you at lunch, I carry scripture in my pocket because I listen to a lot of podcasts and I listen to a lot of sermons, and I'm just constantly writing down. I'm hungry, and I want to know more, and I want to be. I want to be able to be one of those people that when somebody needs to hear, I can talk with them. Yeah. I can disciple them. That's why even your class, the Tuesday night class, when you came to me and you were like, hey, I need you to pray about this. And I said, no, I already did. I said, I prayed. And again, here's where the power of prayer comes in. I had been praying. Okay, Lord, I'm at this point. And I feel like I'm sitting on the fence right now, and I need that nudge. I need that push over to go to. And then 2 days later, you come up and talk to me about this class, and I was like, "That's nope." My wife and I mean, we're both, deeply engrossed in learning. I mean, she already came from knowledgeable. Her father was a preacher. Yeah. But she's still learning and finding new things about herself or things that she needs to work on as well. Yeah. So, and it's great. We do it together. The new series that we're doing on Wednesday night. We only bought one book this time because I said to her, I want us to read it and do it together. Yeah. So, and we do. So
So I want to kind of, for our listeners' benefit, explain the Tuesday night class that he's talking about is the Living in Jesus Bible study that I did not write. It was written by Dr. Greg and Ben Berzina down at Christian Families Today. I think they're in Noonan, Georgia. It's a great study on the exchange life. We're just going through one chapter at a time and discovering the truths that it presents. And I found that most people are willing to do a Bible study. This is a little different. Are you finding that some of the answers in the book are not really coming out of the content as much as coming out of your own?
Yeah, they're
heart?
Coming out of me, but I like that better.
Yeah, I like the way they bring what's in my heart and what the truth is, bring them together to let the truth transform me from the inside out. There's all kind of arrangements, so I just wanted to give a shout out to those guys. They put a really good product together, and it's been very helpful to me as a discipleship tool with other people. And I'm glad that you came. You know, I asked you, I'm like, man, you already come to these other 2 nights that we have, and I'm going to ask you to come out a third night. That's crazy. But then you'd already surrendered and said yes. So this is not going to last forever, just a few weeks, right?
Oh, yes. It's No, as a matter of fact, what was it? We were talking with some friends of ours, and I can't remember who it was, but we were talking with some friends of ours, and I was telling them, and I said, well, yeah, I said, well, we go to church on Sunday. I said, Tuesday night I do this study with our pastor. I said, Wednesday night is Bible study night, which we're doing a series. I said, and then Thursday night I do the men's group. Yeah. And they looked at me, and he's adding up in his head, and he goes, you do? And he goes, and church on Sunday? And I said, well, yes. You know, and he's like, when do you? I says, I find the time when I can. I says, and sometimes it's overwhelming, but I don't want to give it up because I want to learn. I want to better myself, not for I want to better myself for him.
Well, I would normally not advocate for somebody to be that overwhelmed with these different Bible studies, but you know, Thursday night, that men's group is just kind of come, have a meal together, and then be encouraged in the Lord together. But you spoke with your wife. She gave you thumbs up about doing this on a short-term basis. Yeah. So, you know, I feel my weight of responsibility not to be expecting too much out of people.
No, but the great thing is there's, I don't know, I can't even count how many times I've needed one of those evenings because I didn't feel right at, you know, something hit me at work or just something hit me in general. And it's amazing how you can go to one of those studies and somebody or something will pop up and it's like, dang, that's what you know, I needed to hear that, you know, or men's group. I would come home or whatever and I just would not feel it, you know, but I was like, no, I'm going to go. And then, wow. Yeah, and it refueled my spiritual tank, so to speak.
You know, that's a powerful testimony. Several years ago, I had heard about a revival that broke out. It was supposed to be a week or 2 weeks long, and it had been going on for like 6 weeks in Burlington, North Carolina. So me and Pastor John, I think here from Henry, we went up there. Like, if this is what God is doing, I want to go and see it. I want to catch it, man. I want to bring it to my heart and to my home and to my church. And so we went, and it was a wonderful experience. But I have the same desire in my heart that when I go with these groups and I see what God's doing in people's lives, and they have these, you know, they've been described as aha moments, but they're really God moments where they see God and work in their life, and I'm around the activity of God. Yeah. Like maybe addictive isn't the right word, but maybe it's the right word. I don't know, but I just can't get enough of seeing God work in people's lives.
It's a good addiction to have. I mean,
if you're going to have one, maybe have that one. But.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same thing. You know, even at work, to keep me focused, I listen to sermons. I mean, I will listen to 8-9 sermons in a day. Yeah. But it's, you know, I'm listening to them to learn, but in some cases it keeps me on a track or it helps me with something I'm struggling that day. Yeah. Same instance, if something's not going right at work and I'm feeling frustrated or I'm feeling this down, I mean, I'll stop and I'll be like, and I'll pray, you know, Lord, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? You know, just please, can you help me through this moment? And hour later, it answers itself. And then I'm thinking, wow, you know. Well,
it answers itself as him answering your prayer.
Exactly, yes. He answered my prayer, you know. But then I'm also thinking, you know, why am I getting myself worked up over all this? But then I just needed that moment to talk to him, and he took it away. Yeah. Last Friday, I felt last Friday I felt overwhelmed. I was going into work and I felt overwhelmed. Had so much to do. Well, men's breakfast, and then there was some other things that were piling on. And I sat in my truck and I just prayed. I said, Lord, can you just please help me get through this day? Help me with my stress right now. And within minutes, I got a phone call or text message from somebody. Hey, I know you got this going on. Can I help you out? Hey, can I do that? And it just all. Yeah. And again, this is the power of prayer.
The power of prayer and the love of your Father that He has for you. He sees what you're doing and He's supporting you. The whole idea of Christ's life inside of us is the idea of John 15, that we're just a dry branch, but we're connected to the vine that provides us with this incredible flow of nourishing life. Yeah. And, we're living our life, but we're living a life that the average man couldn't do because he doesn't have the power of the Spirit of God to empower him for it. Years ago we were camping and some friends of ours had us take a water bottle like this one, and they said, do you believe that I could put that in the fire and it wouldn't burn? And of course we're like, no, it'll burn up. So he took the lid off, he sat it in the campfire, and it started over time to boil. Now this is just a thin plastic, it's probably not designed for that. But over time, it just would boil down and evaporate. When it got down to where there really wasn't any water left, it just collapsed. And to me, it's a very beautiful picture of how we have the Spirit of God inside of us. And Corinthians says that we are crushed but not destroyed, and cast down but not forsaken, because we have this life inside of us that is not us, it's the Spirit of God within us. So we can stand in the fire and have everything we need to continue to be fruitful, to flourish, and God gives us strength beyond our own to obey Him and do the things He's called us to do. And your testimony brought that to my mind, because that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because you are doing a lot right now, and it won't be this way forever. But I just admire your hunger. You're feeding on everything you can. You're sending me sermons and text messages, and it's just an encouragement to my soul. And even today at lunch, you had notes from Matt was in the last episode. Yeah. You had notes from watching his. And,
oh, yes.
I think his second one just released today, and you already listened to that one.
Yeah, I listened to it first thing this morning.
I don't know where that hunger comes from, but it comes from God. He
it
gave
does.
That to you.
It does. I mean, and like I said, it's best habit I've ever had. Yeah. So, it's just, and I surrounded myself too. I mean, I can say that as well, is that I've surrounded myself around the right people as well. Those who are godly and those who want to know. I mean, Scott, for instance, every now and then we'll send each other a sermon we may have heard or just something that we may have heard, it's just the uncanny knowledge of, I don't know how exactly. It's just a cool feeling too. Sometimes where somebody else will text me out of the blue, "Hey brother, you're on my mind. How you doing?" Yeah. Things of that nature, and it's like, yeah, I'm doing good, but I did have the, I was feeling kind of the, okay, well, let's talk. I mean, it's great. It's great. It's a great feeling to be surrounded by so many people who are so connected to the Lord, and and just know and can sense these things. And then can also help feed my growth to be a better person towards the Lord. Man, I
love that. So you're emphasizing the value of community, being in community with other Christians. Today, I hit a little something in my own situation, and so I open up to one brother, and the next thing I know, I get like 6 or 7 text messages, all in this group text. Hey, pray for Tinney. He needs a little wisdom today, and I'm like, oh, wow. I just, it was just exciting to know I'm not alone in this thing. Yeah. I got brothers. Everything you're saying is powerful. I want to ask you this question though. Knowing that in your past you chased success, made an idol out of it, step on anybody you have to get what you want. Probably there's people that are watching this that they themselves, or maybe they know someone who is doing that very thing. Do you have any advice that you would offer to the man who's, is now where you were then before you came to the Lord?
Yeah, I mean, in better words, your day of reckoning is coming, because how can I? My best words to say would be get in church, because you're going to realize that there's something way greater than yourself. That's that's what saved me.
So what you're saying is they're chasing the wrong thing.
Oh yes, by far, yes, yeah. You're never going to fulfill yourself. Yeah. Because the more you have, the more you want. The more you want, the more you need. And it's like a dog chasing its tail.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. You make so much money, then you celebrate, so you go out and you buy yourself nice things. Now you have to maintain those nice things. Then those nice things no longer make you feel whole inside. So now you need more new nice things. And it just grows and grows and grows. And it's like a cancer. And it will just continue to eat at you. And in all reality, you think you're making yourself happy. You're really not, but you're also distancing yourself from all those around you, because all you're going to care about is yourself and the things that you want.
Wow.
So my best advice would be, give it up, get your butt in church.
Those are direct words.
If I hadn't have gone to church that Sunday, I'd be right back down that same road. And, and I probably would have lost even way more that was more important to me now than ever.
Yeah.
Because I would have found another job to where I had to be that person, to get my attaboys and all of that.
Sure. When you say that, get to church, I cringe a little bit, because I'm like, well, church is good, but churches are not perfect. Jesus is perfect. Get Jesus. But that morning in church, you got Jesus at church. So
Yes.
I get the heart of what you're saying. It brings joy to my heart.
I say go to church, because there was some years where I lived where I felt like I don't need to go to church. My body is a church. Yeah. Well, it wasn't, but I wasn't treating it like no church. But I felt like, why do I got to go to church? As long as I know God, I don't need to go to church. Yeah. But I'm a firm believer that you find a good church with a good core foundation and a good preacher or a good pastor.
Decent one.
Huh?
Just a decent one will do. As long as he's pushing the word forward. I've heard it all. I've heard guys say, man, my deer stand is my church. I worship God. My boat is my church. I worship. And you can worship from those places, but church is the place where you're under the influence of the word.
Yes.
And that is what God used that day in your heart to bring you to him. When you had the implosion, it all happened because...
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It just seems like it all happened because you came to church that day.
Well, I look at it this way too. If it wasn't for a church, again, I wouldn't know you. Yeah. I wouldn't know Scott. I wouldn't know a lot of people. I wouldn't know all those great people at church that care about us, that want to see, that talk. Lance, I mean, that man right there, and that's my thing. I mean, church is the good foundation. You need a good shepherd to bring you back, and then you have I guess the shepherd brings you back to a good flock, and that's what we have. I mean, it's a good flock there. I mean, those people don't know. You walk in, you're not a stranger. Yeah, and that's what drew me. And without all of that, I wouldn't even be sitting here today. Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of where is finding a good church with, and I agree with you to an aspect, because when we were church surfing, we went to a couple of good churches, and I liked the pastor. I could connect with him because he was on a human level, so to speak, but I couldn't connect with the people. Yeah. And my wife even knew some of those people, but it was like we'd show up and they'd wave from a distance, not, hey, come sit over with us. Yeah. And then if we missed a couple of weeks, nobody called, nobody, texted or anything like that. Man, here at Philippi, you sneeze and somebody heard you, and it's like, hey, put a prayer group out for this, But that's great, and that's a sense of community. Yeah. And that's what helps build you and make you even more.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts. I asked you, what advice would you give somebody who is now where you were when you were chasing your tail with success? Get your butt in church. I think I'm going to quote you on that. I might have to tweet that or whatever, put that on social media. Get your butt in church, Ed O.
I mean, and like I said, and I was a firm believer. I don't need church as long as I'm living right and I'm doing right. Everything's good, but that's really not the case.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your story today. So many people, another thought, so many people go to church who don't have Christ.
Yeah.
And they don't have the spirit. They don't have the hunger that you have. And so they give churches a bad name. So that's why I cringe when they're like, man, you just need to go to church. No, you need salvation. You need new life, regeneration through Jesus Christ. And if you have that, you need a close relationship with him so that he can infuse you with his life and his spirit and empower you to do what he wants you to do. That's what I want for people. Jesus promised an abundant life, an abundance of life. And that's what comes to those who receive him, follow him, and obey him every day. When that's the abundant life you're enjoying now. And it's all a grace of God. It's all the gift of God.
Yeah.
And there's parts of obedience that's on our side of the property line, but most of it is coming from his power source. It's coming from him. He does the heavy lifting. And so you have a great story. I'm so glad you shared it today.
No problem.
You took us on a journey from Chicago down here to Georgia, and your spiritual development, maturity, and you're 18 months old spiritually about, and God has done some powerful things in you, and your hunger, you're just growing so fast.
Yeah.
I admire that. And anyway, I'm very excited for your story. Thank you for coming. Opening
Not a
your
problem.
heart.
I'm glad you asked me to come here.
And, all these groups we've been talking about, we got one in just a couple hours.
I know.
Don't we?
Yeah.
So you want to give that shout out to anybody before we go today? Maybe Randy. I don't know.
Yeah. Randy, get your butt in church.
There it is. That's it for today's episode of the Exchange Living Podcast. If this conversation encouraged you, make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you stream. And don't forget, you can also subscribe and watch on YouTube. Until next time, remember, real freedom in Christ begins when we exchange our life for His.